Hello, everyone. Around the world, I believe. We've got people on the line who are all different countries around Australia, Canada, the US. It's amazing that you're all here with us today as we present to you Brian Wehlburg and a spotlight on holistic management. So welcome, Brian. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here today.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Victoria. Thank you for inviting us.
Not a problem. It's great to have you. And we'll just wait a few more seconds for people to get on the line. I know it's a hard start is we've got to wait for a couple of people to get on and see how we're going, but we might get going if that's all right. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. So what we'll be doing today is obviously Brian will be talking about the sort of general principles of holistic management and putting a bit of spotlight onto it and an introduction for anyone who may not really know about it or would like to just know a little bit more about what Brian does. But a quick introduction to Brian. So he is originally from Africa and migrated to Australia 20 years ago. He's managed his own farming businesses in Zimbabwe and Australia. In 1995, he attended an introductory holistic management course, which in turn inspired him to implement his new understanding and knowledge of using grazing as a tool to improve the environment. 6 years later, he completed his course as a holistic management certified educator. So he is a director of his training and consultancy company, Inside Out Management, and has worked across Australia and New Zealand delivering holistic management courses and grazing management workshops. His enjoyment of sharing his passion for environmental improvement and grazing management is what inspired us to have him with us today. So welcome again, Brian. Really appreciate your time. Yeah, I'll hand it over to you to educate and inspire.
Well, thanks, Victoria. You don't know what you're doing, giving me free reign like that. But anyway, we'll give it a go. We'll give it a go. Thanks very much, and thanks everybody for joining us for a chat today. Yeah, I just really wanted to focus today on holistic management and what it's about. So holistic management at its core is just a decision-making framework. It allows humans to manage complexity, which we're definitely not good at. I often ask, particularly farmers, could they count heifers, steers, and cows coming down the race simultaneously together? And of course, they can't. Very few people could count two things at one time, let alone three. And farming has got to be one of the most complex businesses there is. Not only are we dealing with a business, but we're also dealing with the vagrancies of weather. We're dealing with constant change in the environment, as well as all the social, the financial areas that other businesses deal with. So managing a farm, as particularly a livestock enterprise, is hugely complex. And as humans, we generally don't manage complexity well. And so often we find ourselves just focusing on a component of management, be it social, be it environmental, but normally productivity and financial is where we tend to focus. And well, the environment always comes back to bite us, and often so does the social side. With your relationships with your neighbours and what have you, your neighbours probably being the most important people for a farmer at the end of the day. We've just been through fires and drought and God knows what, and having good relationships with your community is where success lies at the end of the day. And where does that community, which is so important to us, where does it lie in normal business decision making, especially on farms where we don't have a board member or someone who deals with specifically that side of the business. It normally all lands in one person or a family's lap. And as I said, we're not good at managing that complexity. So holistic management at its core is just a decision-making framework, and it allows that complexity. Every paddock's different, every farm's different, every farmer's different. Your passions are different, your energies are different. Everything's uniquely different, and we all have different experiences. And so holistic management allows us to work through that complexity and come out with good decisions that are socially, financially, and economically sound, all at the same time, which again is complex, and humans often don't go there. If you've just had a naughty letter from the bank manager saying that you overdrawn and he wants to see you within a week, I guarantee you your decisions will take a financial slant for the next week. As would they, if you just had a huge thunderstorm and a big gully has just ripped through one or two of your paddocks. As a human, we then tend to focus on the environmental side for a while. We can't manage all three of those components at the same time. So, I always say to folks, I've never met a single farmer that wakes up in the morning and says, I'm off to go and destroy a bit of my farm today. But I think most of us do it every day, decision by decision. We don't mean to do it, but because we can't manage that complexity, it somehow creeps into our decision making, and we do things that probably damage the farm or damage our relationships, and we say to ourselves, yes, we'll come back and sort them out later. Well, later never comes. Now's the moment that you've got to do it. So having a framework that allows individuals, businesses, families, farming families to collectively make sound decisions is a really important component of basically a successful business. Every business relies somehow on environmental. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of town, in a city somewhere. We have to have acknowledgement that without sunlight shining on a green leaf somewhere, and either people eating the green leaf or you eating an animal that ate the green leaf, you couldn't have a business, you couldn't have an industry, you couldn't have an orchestra, you couldn't have a government for that matter. So we really need to have a major focus on that environmental side of all our decisions, because every decision you make will have that little ripple effect down the line. So just often we come across this idea that if we can just get the right technology, or if we can just get the right knowledge, we can solve a lot of especially the environmental problems, but also the social problems in the world today. And just to get you thinking, I'll just quickly scribble on the chart here. Hopefully you'll all be able to see it. If we just put a straight graph like that, and I said, what's happened to our technological advances in the last 1,000 years? And you could put that on a graph, and it would look something like that. And if I said to you, well, what about our knowledge of the world, knowledge in general? Today we know more about the human brain, the gut biome, a cubic inch of soil. We know more about our atmosphere, and we know more about outer space today than at any time in human history. So both of these things have increased dramatically in the last 1,000 years. But when we look at biodiversity, today we're losing more species than at any time in human history. And it's directly opposite to technology and knowledge. So, when I look at that, I think, well, it's not about our levels of technology that are driving the problems we see in the world today. It's not our level of knowledge. Today we have more knowledge. It's really about making decisions. And Alan Savory's, his key concept there, that humans have always used a very similar way of making decisions, a framework, and it doesn't manage complexity. So as soon as we get to environments, we have these huge problems. So, again, holistic management at its core is about making good decision making. And today, I think there's, again, a bit of divergence when people start talking about, climate change and biodiversity loss and et cetera, and loss of productivity on farms. For me, a big aha moment at that was when I started looking at them as all one and the same thing. The Gobi Desert spreading at 2,500 square kilometers every year. That's a lot of grassland, animals, people that have disappeared or gone somewhere else. I believe the Sahara is spreading at 12 miles every 10 years. And again, the Sahara Desert encompasses the whole area of the United States. I mean, it's a vast area. And I suppose in a way we've stopped talking about the spread of deserts because we haven't been able to stop them. So, and then we started talking about biodiversity loss. As we lost that grass species, or the last western rhino in Africa, that whole living organism was basically carbon. The body of a rhino principally is C6H12O6, so a large component of it is carbon. Where has all that carbon gone from those living species? It's gone somewhere else. And then as we lose biodiversity, and we see all the studies coming out today where Europe claims they're losing 74% of its, or lost 74% of its insects. Huge numbers of animals are going extinct or verging on extinction. All of those life forms are at their core carbon. And so as we lose those species, where is all that carbon that inhabited their bodies? Where's it gone? And again, the answer is somewhere else. And today, with what we call climate change, we know where that carbon's gone, and we desperately need to get it back down to earth, to enhance life. So, and through Alan Savory's observations in large wild areas in Africa, he was managed to make that connection between properly managed wildlife as a tool to bring down carbon and bring back life to our planet, and generally make life easier for people. So that's where I sort of started my journey, because I was traditionally a crop farmer in Zimbabwe in Africa, and but my real passion was wildlife, and so we ended up managing a 140,000 acre conservancy, and the knowledge at that time from the government agencies was to burn every 4 years, and they put the label, because that was natural, onto that program. But very soon after implementing that, we started seeing a simplifying of species, encroachment of low successional species like thorn bushes and things. And so then it was time to look somewhere else. And so we got involved with, as Victoria pointed out, with Alan Savory down at that piece, and got really excited about the possibility of using livestock. And I love Joel Salatin's quotes that livestock are they reproduce themselves, they're solar powered, and they appreciate on your balance sheet. Try and do that with a tractor. So using livestock just makes so much sense, especially if badly managed livestock is the root cause of a lot of the problems we're seeing in the world. If we don't fix that, we're really just throwing aspirin at a headache, and we need to stop hitting ourselves on the head with a hammer. So yeah, I got, I suppose, seriously involved in the livestock side of things, and using livestock as a way of restoring biodiversity, bringing back wildlife. The wildlife industry at that time in Africa, if you had a good season, you couldn't go and buy from your local auction, a couple of buffalo and giraffe and elephant. There just wasn't that facility. So you had to try and build resilience into the landscape. And really, livestock managers all around the world need to do the same. We can't just be destocking and rushing off and restocking every time we have a poor rainy season. We've got to create that resilience in the landscapes. Those things weren't available before humans started managing. So we need to reverse the degradation that we're seeing. And as Alan Savory pointed out, you can do that with wildlife, but they need to be properly managed. And so he's provided some management tools to help with that management of livestock. So even if you're not managing livestock, you can use livestock as a tool. But unlike a tractor, livestock, you can't go and park in the garage and turn it off. It's out there 24 hours a day doing something. And either it's doing good or it's doing bad. It's either regeneratively grazing or it's overgrazing plants and causing problems. So we can't manage that in our heads. It's too complex. And again, so that's where programs like the MAIA program and like the holistic canned grazing, which I think was the basis for all these grazing planning processes that we're seeing, whether they're computerized or paperwork. That's where they have their base, the knowledge in terms of managing time. And Alan Savory used other people like Andre Voisin and various other people in their knowledge. Jan Smuts, soldier statesman from South Africa at the time of the Second World War. He used all their knowledge and has built what we call today holistic management, but going back to, at its core, it's just a decision-making framework. So I teach holistic management to oyster farmers, to people in town. We've been lucky in New South Wales, in Australia. We managed to get into TAFE and create a diploma in holistic management, which was fantastic. Again, it got a lot of support and government backing, but also gave a pathway for young people entering farming or new farmers. It gave them a pathway towards degrees in agriculture, but using holistic management as a stepping stone. And today, I'm again really happy to be involved with Southern Cross University and their regenerative agriculture degree. So I'm helping them a bit with the grazing side of that program, which is fantastic. And again, it's like a world first. So I'm seeing change happening at an ever increasing pace all around the world at the moment. Just what you see on Facebook, what you see in media, you virtually can't pick up a newspaper without seeing something about regenerative agriculture or a new way of doing agriculture, whatever they want to call it. And let's face it, I think most of the studies are showing that for every kg of food we produce, we're exporting 7 to 9 kgs of topsoil. I think one of the recent films made the point that we had 50 harvests left. Now, I don't care even if he's 50% wrong with that statement. If we've got 100 harvests left, we should be seriously concerned for our grandchildren, because that's in their lifespan. So yes, we certainly need to make some big changes, and it's fundamentally about more than either technology or knowledge. It's about the way humans manage our landscapes. And I think, again, it goes back to, I often say, I think we've been managing this way for a long, long time. And if you go back to the days of the early Greeks and Plato's writings, you can see the degradation people were causing back then. And I think most of it lies in the blame that somehow humans have seen themselves as separate from the environment. Those early theologians kind of put humans aside and said we were given some kind of God-given right to manage our environment, and saw ourselves as distance from the environment. But once you appreciate holistic thinking, again, you are your environment. Everything you do in your environment has an impact on you. And once you start acknowledging that, when's it a good idea to pour petrol on your arm and set fire to it? Or when's it a good idea to put chemicals on an arm and suffer the consequences? But we do that to our environment all the time. But we should really be seeing the environment as part of us, and we are part of our environment. And then we'd have a very different view and a different management approach to how we treat the environment. So again, that complexity we often don't get too involved with. I'll flick over my page here.
I might just interject and ask you a quick question, Brian. So do you see, I know these courses and universities have always traditionally taught conventional farming and agriculture, and that's been quite a linchpin in the new generations coming through and not really having that option, I suppose, to go down a different path. So do you see that being a bigger part of education at tertiary levels in terms of universities and TAFEs and that sort of thing you were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. When we look at, and I often, if you go to college or a university and you ask the students the question, what causes overgrazing? Generally, everybody in the class will say too many animals. And so already we've got that bias against animals as a tool. And so when we look at the conventional tool bag for most organizations, government agencies, when we look inside there's technology, fire, and rest are the major tools we use for probably 2/3 of the world's land surface. And when you look at those, technology, fire, and rest, from our understanding, there's nothing there that safely cycles carbon. When we rest areas with seasonal rainfall, the grass tends to grow grey and oxidize. So we lose, all plant material goes grey and oxidize. We lose a component up to the atmosphere. Obviously, technology puts it into the atmosphere. And fire, well, we know what fire does to the atmosphere as well. Puts a lot of carbon up into the atmosphere and takes away from the soil surface where life exists. So, you know, it's as basic as just looking at the tools that conventional courses, degrees promote and focus on, which is technology, fire, and rest. You know, very few go anywhere near grazing animals. And, you know, it could be chickens, it could be ducks, it could be cattle, alpacas, you know, any grazing animal that we can manage is just a tool. It's like a hammer. You can build a house with a hammer, or you can knock it down. And so we've tended to blame tools. We've blamed livestock, we've blamed coal, we've blamed oil, but they're all just resources. It's not the resource that's the problem. It's how we use them, how we manage them, and management's all about decisions again. So it keeps coming back to this point, you know, why are we so bad as humans at making decisions, whether you manage it, you know, a livestock enterprise or you manage a widget factory in town? We seem to be particularly bad at, you know, looking at the impacts of that on the environment, and how can we do those things while enhancing environmental outcome. You know, we don't go there. It's too complex.
While we're sort of on the topic of it as a whole, we've had a question from Campbell come in saying it would be good to understand what holistic management actually is. So what are the key components of it, and how is it different from conventional management?
Super. Yep. So actually, I might just shoot this up here again. Generally, when we look at decision making, humans are very good and, you know, making decisions towards goals and objectives. So we're very good at making decisions towards goals and objectives, but as long as we limit it to that point. If we take it any further, it becomes complex. So the structure of holistic management is to create context. And very simply, the power of context would be, you know, if I said to you, let's make a fire. You know, everybody go, what do I mean? What do I mean? Without context, I said, you know, if I said it's cold, let's make a fire. Once you've got context, then we can proceed in unison towards that objective. You know, if I walk into a room and said, oh, knock out the windows, people would probably phone the police. But if I said, I smell gas, let's knock out the windows, then that would create movement. So, you know, to me, I like picturing context and holistic context. So we factor in social, environmental, as well as financial. Everybody wants to be under the umbrella. So I like using the analogy of an umbrella, which is context. Everybody wants to be under the umbrella. Now, holistic management, gives you a focus of what is that umbrella. And it's a values-based vision, because humans are driven by our feelings and values rather than our logic. So the context is a values-based vision, which then allows you to take your goals and objectives, which are really important. That's how we become so successful in managing in a linear fashion. Take your goals and objectives, and before you actually take that decision, just align it with your context. So the context is a bit like magnetic north on a compass. You know, you just keep on checking if that's the right direction. And, you know, people say, well, our context, everybody's context is going to be different. Because it's values based, it isn't. I've had some amazing experiences where creating a holistic context actually brings people together, and people, you know, on the opposite side of a war, bringing them into a room and getting them to discuss context and values actually brings them together, you know, because no one, when you're talking values and feelings, who doesn't want to feel healthy, or who doesn't want to feel financially secure? Who doesn't want to feel excited and inspired? So if you can start at those values and feelings that connect us all as humans, and then start saying, well, if we want those feelings often, which are the drivers which get people out of bed, which inspire the decision making, what has the environment got to be? And again, holistically, we look at the environment as people, community, and the actual environment itself. How's that environment got to be to sustain all your goals and objectives? And so again, once people have got that idea in their head, it just drives their decision making to achieve those outcomes. I often align it with self-visualization in sport. You know, self-visualization in sport today has just become a monstrous part of sports training. You know, picturing what success looks like. So you see people at the end of the diving board before doing, you know, an Olympic gold dive, and they're completely composed. What are they doing? They're visualizing success. And if I could focus on farmers, you know, when I often talk to farmers and I say, what does success look like? You know, it's getting top price for a beast, or it's, you know, getting 100% genetics, or it's getting 100% conception rates, or it's making X number of $1 million. But really, that's just a pathway to achieving context. And if you don't know what a good, happy community, family, and landscape look like, it's really difficult to even consider them when you're down here making decisions towards goals and objectives. So, you know, holistic management, the focus is your context, which serves two parts. A, it creates the driver and the vision for yourself, that magnetic north on a compass that just constantly pulls you into line, but also pulls people together. Ultimately, we all want the same thing, regardless of race, color, religion, whether you have livestock or you don't, whether you eat meat or you don't. We all want the same thing. So to me, you know, the holistic context is hugely powerful from all those angles. But it is very structured, starting off with feelings and values, because today we know feelings and values are really what drive decision making. We used to think it was a lot about logic, but yeah, we make all our decisions at the end of the day based on feelings. Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. We've got, you know, bringing the focus down a little bit more specific. So Peter has asked if you have a view on the use of cover cropping to aid pasture development and rest other paddocks, and also is there any room for herbicide intervention?
Fantastic. Yeah. No, great question. Now, holistic management doesn't say you can't use any tool. You can use dynamite, you can use nuclear weapons, you can use chemicals, you can use herbicides. What holistic management does say to you says, if you want this kind of lifestyle to be supported by this kind of environment, is that use of that chemical or those seeds, is it leading you in that direction? So it gives you that vision to help you make that decision, okay? And the decision-making matrix helps you make a good decision. So I have a concern at the moment, especially with the huge swell in interest in cover crops and pasture cropping and all these wonderful methodologies that have literally exploded in the last couple of years. If people continue to do the same practice that caused the degradation or loss of biodiversity or loss of productivity in the first place, if they don't change that and they just believe by sowing in some seeds every year, they're going to get on top of the problem, it's not going to go away. So, you know, part of good decision making is trying to discover what's actually going on, digging down into the root cause of problems. So, for instance, if productivity is low on a property and you know the real reason is because of poor grazing management, sowing no amount of seeds, whether it's pasture cropping, no-kill cropping, whatever it is going to resolve that issue. We have to get back to what's grazing management. So again, holistic management allows you to uncover those root causes of some of the problems that you may be reaching into your pocket to fix and maybe not quite getting it right, which then locks you into this continual investment of more and more seeds or more and more fuel or more and more chemicals or fertilizer. You know. So again, just to reiterate that, holistic management doesn't say, you know, don't use fertilizers or don't use this or do use seed. It says here are all the tools known to humans. Okay. As long as you've got a good vision of how you, your community, and your land have to be, you use whichever tool is appropriate. And sometimes it may be you need to use a bit of diesel and a bit of chemical. That's fine. as long as it's moving you towards that vision of yours of, a healthy environment.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that comes back to, like you're saying, all about context and putting it all together in that space. And we've got a lot of questions coming through, and to everyone, if we don't get to them, Brian and I will put together some answers for the ones that we don't get to, and let everyone know about those. But we've got one from Libby, which kind of comes back to the bigger picture, I suppose, in terms of do you think that big agriculture is driving the values and decision making as opposed to the human or farmer specifically?
Yeah, obviously there's a big focus on financial when we get up that end of scale. But again, no corporation or company exists without the people that make the decisions for it. So, all those decision makers, they have children, they have grandchildren who want to eat good food, breathe clean air, and drink good water. So if we can just put context above that company's, and a lot of companies have missions and visions and mission statements and things like that, but a lot of them are either designed around marketing. We'll do the best for our clients, we'll get the best return, or we'll produce the best, cheapest product, or whatever it is. And they aren't really visions or holistic. So even when you look at a company's mission or vision statement, that probably doesn't drive decision making for the people employed by the company to make decisions for it. It's all about marketing at the end of the day. So big companies, small companies, every nation in the world should have a context to make decisions towards. When we look at all governments around the world today, I can't think of a single policy that a government makes that isn't focused on a problem or avoiding a problem. Literally, I can't. We know what happens if all you do is focus on problems. We need vision. We need holistic vision to come into governments to say, right, as Australians or Americans, the people need to be like this, our communities need to be like this, and our environment needs to be, healthy, clear-flowing creeks, covered soils, productive soils, spongy soils, and then allow people, companies, individuals to make decisions towards that vision. Because as I said, I don't think any company means to turn the part of the planet into a desert, but we're doing it. And I don't think the individuals within those companies mean to cause poverty and strife, but we do it decision by decision. So getting us through that complexity, holistic management is a tool to help manage that complexity and come out with better decisions, regardless of whether you're a company, whether you're in agriculture, or whether you're a government.
That's great. Yeah, really good messages there. And everyone, there's a few messages in our chat box saying thank you for what you're saying, and that confidence around that common goal and everyone sort of looking towards that common goal is really, really good message. We've got one more specific message, and you might not want to do this if it gets into too many details at the moment, but we can try, and if not, we can Carol, we'll get back to you at another time. But she's planted multi-species pasture for the past year, summer and winter, with wonderful results, but the persistence of most varieties is not as good as we'd hoped. Any suggestion of management of these pastures and some species might help?
Yep. So I'm presuming she's put in some perennials. It's not just annuals she's put in, so that would be the first query, because if it's just annuals, well, unless the conditions are right, the chances of the annuals re-establishing are pretty small.
Not sure of those specifics, but yeah, I would assume so. Yeah.
Yep. And again, that paddock hasn't degraded and lost productivity because of a lack of seeds. When we look at our soils all around the world, there are tons and tons of seeds. You just disturb soil anywhere and you'll start getting a whole range of species that you probably never knew existed. And seed lasts for an incredibly long time. We've got seed coming out of the the pyramids that have been there for a couple of thousand years are still viable. You know, we've got seed coming out of galleons in the Mediterranean that have been pulled up out of, you know, that have been underwater for hundreds of years. And again, the seed is still viable. So seeds are virtually indestructible, you know. And so what we've got to really focus on is how do we create the environment that suits the type of seed and type of species that we want. Because a lot of people, you know, we go and buy high productivity seeds because, hey, that's going to make us the money, or that's going to create fat animals, or whatever it is. But often we sow them into low successional environments. And we create a bit of disturbance with the seeder or planter, but those seeds aren't actually suited to the environment. So the energy or the disturbance created by the seeder or planter may establish those plants just for a short period. But if that ground very quickly becomes alien and very hard or bare or hot because it doesn't have cover, those seeds aren't going to persist. Yeah? So again, the focus should be, I want my soils covered, deep, rich, full of life. And then generally those seeds will arrive. But if you do happen to go in and sow those seeds, they will then continue to live there rather than drop out. So generally, you know, without specifics, I'd be saying if they're not persisting, it's because the environment doesn't suit them yet. And we can achieve that in multiple ways, either with a lot of diesel and fossil fuel, or we could probably use livestock to do it. And if livestock are actually what caused the problem originally for that land to lose productivity, well, the obvious thing to reach for is let's change our management. Let's change the management of the livestock. Again, just underlining, livestock is just a tool. Livestock doesn't cause deserts or enhance environments. It's the way we manage that tool. Like a hammer, it can build the environment or it can depreciate it. And sadly, most of the time we use livestock in a negative way.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. We might just have one more question from Peter, and I know this is a question that a lot of people ask straight away when sort of delving into the holistic management regen ag space, but how long does it take to see the benefits of holistic grazing management, and will the desired perennial seed bank still be there? I think we've sort of answered the seed question, as they're indestructible almost, but yeah, a lot of people want to know sort of the time frame of how it can be done.
And again, you know, that's what allows people to create that enthusiasm and that passion to keep change happening, because we're not after short-term adjustment. We need sustained change. We actually need to turn the ship around. We need to create a revolution. And literally, I mean, you should be able to see the change within a day. And so I often just say to people, go into the paddock before you move the animals in. Now, you're using the animals as a positive tool. Go into the paddock before you put the animals in. Take 10 steps and look at the tip of your boot. Count the number of times the tip of your boot is bare or covered. If it's bare, ask yourself 2 questions. Is it hard and capped, or is it loose and friable? Put the animals in the paddock for however long you plan to have them there, and sometimes it could be as little as a day. When you take them out, take your 10 steps and see if you've improved that environment. If you've created that disturbance, a little bit of extra cover, maybe a bit of dung and urine. If you don't see that within a day, well, do something different, you know? So we should start seeing the environment responding virtually within a day. You know, that's we become more observant. You know, we don't wait for results. We become proactive. Let's see what would be the impact of that tool? What would be the earliest indicator that yes, we're moving in the right direction? So if I put animals in a paddock and they haven't loosened up the soil, create a little bit more ground cover, cool down the soil just by putting those grasses down. If I haven't achieved that, how can I possibly expect things to change in 6 months or a year's time? So we need to change the way we monitor, and we need to be more proactive in our monitoring rather than saying, well, I've sown the seeds, hopefully in 6 months something's going to happen. We can't afford to do that. nature's too dynamic. It's always constantly changing.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think we've sort of reached the end of our question time. And like I said, we'll endeavour to answer any outstanding questions either directly or we'll put together maybe a little video and get to a couple at a later date. But I'll just put up your details now. And so everybody will be able to see. Here are your details here. So Brian is, like we talked about, he's doing holistic management courses and workshops all around Australia. So you can, there's his details there if you're interested in having a look at any and getting in touch. And I think I will just do that there, and I'll put these up for everybody now. So that's your details there. And yeah, like I said, if you wanted to get in touch with Brian and learn more about anything that he's doing or finding out exactly where his workshops are, that's his website there. And also, if you're interested in anything to do with MAIA Grazing, obviously MAIA is digitising a lot of the theories and putting in practice what Brian teaches and what really we can do with holistic management and putting together grazing plans and really getting across the numbers of your property, so you can, you know, during dry times and you know, good times, you'll be able to adjust stocking rates accordingly and really capitalize on making sure that you're getting those pastures in tip-top shape and keeping them there. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself as well. But otherwise, thank you so much, Brian. It's been amazing having you here. You're absolute genius in the holistic management world. Everybody knows you, and so it's great to have you a part of our MAIA Grazing series of webinars.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me, Vicky.
Not a problem. And we've had a lot of people from chiming in about where they're from. I think the most exotic has been Paraguay. So you've reached a fairly global reach here on the webinar.
That'll be a new one for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and everyone for joining in. This will be available if you want to rewatch anything you've seen here today or send it to any of your friends. You'll get an email notification in the next couple of days with the recording. So thanks again and have a great day, everybody.
Good. Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
Look after each other. Thank you.